I'm with Damian Hinds from the Conservative Party. We've had over 1,500 questions from job seekers on reed.co.uk who are concerned about a variety of employment issues. We've chosen 10 that are most representative of the questions we asked. The first question, Damian, is from Daniel from Leeds. How will your party secure a Brexit deal that doesn't damage the economy or lead to jobs being moved overseas once Britain leaves the single market?
Well, I think Daniel's question actually addresses the two biggest issues in this election, the economy and the negotiations over Brexit. And we're about to start those negotiations. Actually, I think there's every reason to believe we can get a good deal for Britain because there is goodwill on both sides. It's in the interests of other countries in Europe for it to work out for us. But of course, what's really critical is who is engaging in those negotiations, who is leading it for Britain. Theresa May is clearly the most qualified and best placed person to lead those negotiations for Britain. And so I'm confident that she and the team will come home with the right deal.
The next question is Lydia from Brighton, who asks, what will you do to reduce the wage gap between top earners and those at the bottom?
Well, of course, it was a Conservative government that brought in the national living wage, which makes a significant difference to people on lower incomes. And we've said we're going to continue with the national living wage growing so it reaches the point of 60% of median earnings. And so it's something like 2.75 million people benefit directly from the national living wage. But there's also a ripple effect on people on higher incomes, a little bit further up the income scale. So lots and lots of people benefiting from that policy.
Question 3. How would you improve job security and workers' rights? This is a question from Orhan from London. For those in non-typical employment, such as Deliveroo, Uber, and those on 0 hours contracts?
Well, that's a very good question. There's been a lot of focus, quite rightly, on this area that Orhan touches on. And of course, there's always been kind of non-standard employment. There's always been piecework, for example, or casual work. But with technology, it sort of turbocharges the sorts of change that you can see. And recognising that, the Prime Minister asked Matthew Taylor to conduct a review into modern working arrangements, modern working practices. His report hasn't yet come back, but when it does, government will obviously respond to that, but we have said very clearly in our manifesto that we'll make sure that there are the right protections and so on for people, whether they're employed, self-employed, in traditional or non-traditional forms of work.
The next question is Linda from Sheffield. With the retirement age going up, what help will your party give to over 50s out of work?
Well, of course, we don't have a sort of default retirement age now. There is a state pension age, and it's quite right that, of course, as people live longer on average, and that's a great thing because of medical advance and public health advance. People are going to be working longer, and we produced a strategy called Fuller Working Lives, which outlines all the different things that can be done around that. We've already brought in the right to request flexible working. In our manifesto, we put forward the unpaid carers leave. But there's actually a lot more to do with working with employers. To help and encourage them to recruit, retrain and retain people who are older. That's sometimes about rethinking roles, about helping the individual to think about how they might want their career to evolve later on in the career, maybe moving to a less arduous role or to a part-time role or something like that. And of course we have to recognise that more and more older people have caring responsibilities themselves. So in the same way that with young families, you're looking after children, sometimes if you're an older person, you are looking after grandchildren actually, but also caring for husband or wife or sometimes your own parents.
The next question is from Sarah from Reading. What are your plans to improve chances for young people to acquire the necessary education, training and skills for a meaningful job in the working world?
Well, that's a really good question. And of course, the world is becoming a more competitive place. The so-called knowledge economy calls for greater levels of skills. And of course, we also want to improve our productivity further in this country. And behind all of that is education and skills. Of course, we've had a very ambitious apprenticeship programme, now backed by the apprenticeship levy and the new Institute for Apprenticeships to uphold the quality. And we want to continue with that. We think apprenticeships are a really, really important way to get more and more people. I was going to say young people. Actually, young people are also older people because you can be on an apprenticeship at any stage in your career to help with that upskilling.
Our next question, Samir from London asks, what will you do to protect jobs from increased automation and robotics in the workplace?
Well, there's been a lot of focus on this area, and quite rightly, because with artificial intelligence, with robotics, with voice computing, all these different new technologies, they have the potential to create significant changes in economies, not just our one, of course, but throughout the world, and also, therefore, changes in the structure of the workforce, the type of work that's available. In the past, of course, when there's been technological change, that has also created new opportunities. And so we mustn't think of this just as something to be dealt with. It's also an opportunity to be seized. We need to make sure we're at the forefront of these technologies. We need to make sure that we have the right skill levels. But we also need to make sure that we have the flexibility in our skills and the ability to reskill and acquire new skills as the economy further develops.
Carol from Bristol has asked, what will you do to help the disabled and people with mental health issues find and keep work?
Well, there have been improvements in the number of people who have disabilities who are in work, like 500,000 over the last few years. And in our manifesto, we put forward the objective to help 1 million more into work, because there are many, many people with disabilities or mental health issues who want to work and at the moment are not doing so, not able to. Mental health, of course, which is in this question, is critical, and it's a very central part actually of our manifesto, which talks about making sure that workplaces think about mental health first aid in the same way as you might about physical health first aid, and to make sure there isn't discrimination against people with, for example, fluctuating conditions. There is a lot more we can do with programs like See Potential that really encourages employers to think about the way they go about recruitment, the way they go about making sure their workplace is as inclusive as possible. I think there's more potential in those two.
Next question, Gemma from Cambridge. How will you make sure that skilled migrants continue to be able to come to the UK and benefit our economy?
With leaving the European Union, that will change our system in terms of the movement of people and so on. But we need to continue to attract the brightest and the best to this country, as we always have, and I'm sure we always will. And we've said that we will make sure the visa system is aligned to the requirements that our changing economy has, in line with our modern industrial strategy. There's an independent committee that advises on these things, so we will ask that committee to advise on how the visa system should reflect the needs of our economy to make sure that it remains at the forefront of technological change and advance and so on.
Pascal from London asks, with a continuing gender pay gap, underrepresentation of women on boards, what will you do to counter gender discrimination in the workplace?
Well, these do remain big issues, although, of course, the gender pay gap has come down, and for younger people it's come down quite substantially. But there is still a pay gap, particularly for after having children. I think the first thing is, of course, to shine a light on that and to make sure people know about it, and to encourage firms, encourage employers to think about the progression opportunities that are there, to make sure that where possible, progression opportunities, promotion opportunities are available with flexible working options where that's appropriate. And we've also said that for larger companies, we will have pay gap reporting, so that brings boardroom focus to this issue and helps companies to think through how they're going to make things better.
And finally, Derek from Hastings asks, how will you stop low-cost foreign workers coming into the UK to compete for roles here, driving down wages?
Well, of course, we will have control over immigration from the European Union future. That doesn't mean none, of course. That means that we will have control ourselves, and we also outline various ways in which we will further the controls on immigration for non-EU countries. But immigrants in this country make a huge contribution to our economy, to our society, and that is something to be celebrated. I think in terms of making sure that wage competition is fair. I mean, the national living wage, again, is at the heart of this, making sure that there is a decent standard of income that's available to people. And also the enforcement is very important. And in government, we've increased the enforcement to make sure that people really are being paid the national living wage.
Damian Hinds, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.